The milkshake fell in slow motion, thick and pink, sliding down the rigid camouflage uniform of a man who did not flinch. Laughter erupted around him, sharp and careless, the kind that comes from people who believe they are untouchable. Phones were already raised, hungry for humiliation, convinced they were capturing the downfall of just another quiet black man who looked out of place in a crowded restaurant full of confidence and cruelty. No one noticed the scars hidden beneath the fabric. No one recognized the stillness in his eyes, the kind forged in deserts, oceans, and nights where survival depended on silence and restraint. In that moment, the bully felt powerful, the crowd felt entertained, and the world felt familiar in its injustice. What none of them understood was that they had just crossed the wrong man, and their laughter was about to echo far beyond that room. If stories that expose injustice and reveal hidden strength matter to you, take a moment now to share, comment, and subscribe to the Channel Black Voice Story. Your support helps these voices reach the world. The man stood alone near the counter, posture straight but relaxed, as if the weight of the world rested easily on his shoulders. His name was Marcus Hale, though few people knew it, and fewer still would have guessed the life he had lived by looking at him. He wore his Navy-issued fatigues not for attention, but because he had come straight from a long drive after attending a memorial service for a fallen brother in arms. The uniform was not a costume to him. It was a second skin, soaked with memories of sacrifice, discipline, and loyalty. Yet to the strangers around him, it was simply fabric, and to some, an invitation. Marcus had learned early in life how to disappear in plain sight. Growing up in a neighborhood where police sirens were more common than lullabies, he had mastered the art of staying quiet, keeping his head down, and moving forward without complaint. His father had worked 2 jobs and still been stopped and searched more times than Marcus could count. His mother had taught him dignity through exhaustion, showing him how to carry pain without letting it poison the soul. Racism was not an abstract concept to Marcus. It was a daily companion, subtle and overt, following him from classrooms to job interviews, from sidewalks to store aisles. The military had offered him something rare, structure without judgment, at least at first. When Marcus enlisted, he believed that excellence could outrun prejudice. He trained harder than anyone else, endured more, spoke less, and listened more. He learned that in elite spaces, the margin for error was razor thin, and for someone who looked like him, it was even thinner. The Navy SEALs were not just a unit. They were a crucible. Marcus passed tests that broke men twice his size. He survived missions that never made the news and carried secrets he would never be allowed to share. Still, even among heroes, bias found a way in. He heard the jokes when they thought he was out of earshot. He felt the skepticism when he outperformed expectations. He was praised for being surprisingly calm, as if calmness were not a prerequisite for survival. Marcus did not argue. He did not correct. He let his actions speak, because in his world, words could get you killed. That afternoon, the restaurant buzzed with casual arrogance. It was a popular place near a college campus, filled with young professionals and students celebrating small victories. A group of men occupied a table nearby, loud and performative, fueled by alcohol and entitlement. They noticed Marcus almost immediately. The uniform caught their eye first, then his skin color, then the fact that he was alone. To them, Marcus was a symbol they felt entitled to interpret. Some saw him as a prop. Others saw him as a target. One of them, a man whose confidence was built on cruelty, leaned into the attention of his friends. He had grown up believing the world existed for his amusement, that consequences were things that happened to other people. He had learned, consciously or not, that humiliating someone different could earn him laughter, approval, and power. Marcus sensed a shift in the room the way he always did. Years of combat had trained him to read atmospheres, to feel danger before it announced itself. He heard the whispers, the snickers, the exaggerated glances. He kept his eyes forward, focused on the menu, reminding himself that he was no longer in hostile territory, that he was home, that restraint was still the best weapon. But home had never meant safety for him. The tension built quietly at first, like pressure beneath the surface. The group of men grew louder, their laughter sharper, their movements more exaggerated. One of them mimicked a salute, mocking the uniform without understanding its cost. Another made a comment about how easy it must be to get into the military these days, his words dripping with implication. The laughter that followed was not just amusement. It was permission. Marcus remained still. He had endured worse. He had been called names in training, doubted in briefings, and overlooked in promotions. He had learned that reacting often gave power to the wrong people. Yet something about the moment felt heavier, more dangerous, because it was so public, so casual, so accepted by the silence of others. The bully stood up, milkshake in hand, emboldened by the attention of his friends and the absence of immediate consequence. He moved closer, invading Marcus's space with the careless confidence of someone who had never been truly afraid. The room seemed to hold its breath, though no one consciously acknowledged it. Phones shifted. Eyes followed. When the milkshake poured over Marcus's head, it was not just an act of humiliation. It was a message. It said that his service did not matter, that his discipline was invisible, that his blackness outweighed his sacrifice in the eyes of those who felt entitled to judge him. The liquid soaked into his uniform, sticky and cold, sliding down his face, clinging to the insignia he had earned with blood and sweat. Laughter exploded. Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment. In that instant, memories flooded him. He saw the faces of teammates who never came home. He felt the weight of a rifle in his hands, the silence before chaos, the responsibility of leadership under fire. He remembered being taught that the greatest strength was control, that violence was a last resort, that honor meant choosing restraint even when provoked. He opened his eyes. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker. The bully waited for a reaction, expecting anger, embarrassment, maybe even tears. What he did not expect was stillness. Marcus did not shout. He did not strike. He did not even wipe the milkshake away immediately. He simply turned his head slowly, his gaze locking onto the man in front of him. That look carried weight. It was not threatening in the way movies portrayed toughness. It was something deeper, forged in reality. It was a look of someone who had faced death and learned that ego was meaningless. The bully faltered, just slightly, though he tried to hide it with a grin. Around them, the room began to shift. Some laughter faded, replaced by uneasy murmurs. A few people looked away, suddenly uncomfortable with their role as spectators. Others leaned in, sensing that something was changing. Marcus took a step forward, careful, deliberate. He reached into his pocket and removed his phone, not to record, but to place it on the counter. It was a subtle signal, one learned through years of discipline. Accountability matters. He then wiped the milkshake from his eyes and adjusted his uniform with practiced precision. The bully scoffed, throwing out another remark meant to regain control, but his voice lacked the confidence it had moments earlier. His friends shifted in their seats, sensing the energy turn against him. The power dynamic they had assumed was no longer stable. What they did not know was that Marcus had spent years de-escalating situations far more dangerous than this. He had talked down armed men, navigated cultural minefields, and made decisions that determined who lived and who died. He understood human behavior intimately, especially the kind driven by fear and insecurity. The manager approached hesitantly, torn between maintaining order and avoiding confrontation. Marcus raised a hand gently, signaling that he had things under control. The gesture was calm, authoritative, and unmistakably earned. It carried the weight of command, even if no one present could fully articulate why they felt compelled to respect it. Marcus began to speak, not with anger, but with clarity. His words were measured, each one chosen with care. He did not insult. He did not threaten. He described what had just happened in plain terms, naming the act for what it was, an assault, an act of public humiliation rooted in prejudice. He spoke about service, not as a boast, but as a responsibility. He spoke about restraint, about the difference between strength and cruelty. The room listened. People who had been laughing minutes earlier now felt the sting of recognition. They saw themselves reflected in his words, whether they wanted to or not. The bully's grin faded completely, replaced by defensiveness, then confusion, then something closer to fear. For the first time, he realized that this was not a game, that the man he had targeted was not weak, and that the eyes now on him were no longer approving. Marcus finished speaking and stepped back, reclaiming his space without aggression. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with realization. In that silence, the imbalance of the moment became clear. The bully was no longer the center of attention. Marcus was. The turning point came not with fists or shouting, but with accountability. A bystander, emboldened by Marcus's composure, spoke up, calling out the behavior that moments earlier had been met with laughter. Another followed, then another. The collective silence that had allowed the act to happen began to crack. Security arrived, responding to reports of a disturbance. They took in the scene quickly. The stained uniform, the shaken bully, the crowd buzzing with tension. Marcus presented his identification calmly, his rank and service history visible to anyone who looked closely. The effect was immediate and profound. The bully tried to explain himself, stumbling over excuses that sounded hollow even to his own ears. He minimized his actions, attempted humor, deflection, anything to escape the weight of what he had done. But the narrative had shifted. This was no longer about entertainment. It was about respect, about consequences, about the line between privilege and responsibility. As security escorted the bully away, his friends shrank into themselves, suddenly aware how thin their protection had been. Phones that had been raised to record humiliation now captured something else, a lesson unfolding in real time. Some of those videos would later circulate online, not as viral mockery, but as evidence of a moment where dignity refused to be erased. Marcus stood quietly as the room exhaled. He felt a familiar ache in his chest, the one that came from holding back emotions that had no easy outlet. He did not feel victorious. He felt tired of having to prove humanity in spaces that denied it, tired of carrying the burden of representation, of knowing that his response would be scrutinized not just as an individual, but as a symbol. Yet he also felt something else, a sense of purpose reaffirmed. He had chosen restraint not out of weakness, but out of strength. He had refused to become what the bully expected, or what the crowd might have sensationalized. In doing so, he had forced everyone present to confront their own assumptions. The manager offered apologies, complimentary meals, gestures meant to smooth over discomfort. Marcus accepted politely, though he knew such gestures did not address the deeper issue. Racism was not solved with free food or quiet apologies. It required confrontation, reflection, and sustained effort. As he prepared to leave, several people approached him, expressing gratitude, shame, admiration. Some admitted they wanted to speak up, but had been afraid. Others confessed they had laughed, not fully understanding why, until it was too late. Marcus listened without judgment. He understood fear. He understood conditioning. He also understood that growth began with honesty. Outside, the evening air felt cooler, cleaner. Marcus paused for a moment, looking up at the sky, grounding himself. He thought of his fallen teammates, of the values they had lived by, of the promise they had made to protect something larger than themselves. He knew that this moment, small as it might seem compared to war, mattered. It was part of the same fight, the fight for dignity, equality, and respect. In the days that followed, the video spread, not the clip of the milkshake pouring, but the aftermath, the calm, the accountability, the quiet power of restraint. Comment sections filled with debate, reflection, and inevitably resistance. Some dismissed it as overblown. Others recognized themselves in the bystanders and vowed to do better. Marcus returned to his life, to training, to mentoring younger service members who looked like him and those who did not. He spoke about the incident when asked not to seek attention, but to teach. He emphasized that racism thrived not just in hatred, but in silence, in laughter that excused cruelty, in systems that protected bullies and scrutinized victims. The bully faced consequences beyond the embarrassment of removal. His actions followed him, as actions often do in the age of accountability. Opportunities closed. Conversations became uncomfortable. He was forced, whether willingly or not, to confront the reality that his behavior had been shaped by a culture that rewarded dominance and dismissed empathy. For many who witnessed the incident online or in person, it became a reference point, A reminder that strength did not always look like aggression, that heroes did not always announce themselves, that racism could be challenged without violence, but not without courage. Marcus never claimed the title of hero. He knew the word was often used too loosely, sometimes to avoid deeper examination. He preferred to think of himself as a man doing his duty, not just to his country, but to his conscience. He understood that change was slow, uneven, and often painful. But he also knew that moments like this, moments where truth pierced complacency, were necessary. The restaurant eventually returned to its usual rhythm. New customers filled the seats. Laughter resumed. But something lingered, an invisible shift in awareness. Some would forget. Others would carry the lesson forward, letting it influence how they treated the next stranger, how they responded to the next act of injustice. Marcus carried it too, adding it to the long list of experiences that had shaped him. He knew that racism would not disappear because of one incident, one speech, one viral video. But he also knew that every act of dignity mattered, that every refusal to be diminished chipped away at the structures that upheld inequality. His story was not unique, and that was the point. Across the world, countless others faced similar moments, some with cameras rolling, many without. The difference lay not in the cruelty, but in the response, in the choice to confront or to comply, to speak or to stay silent. This was not just a story of a bully and a milkshake. It was a story of a system tested by restraint, of prejudice exposed by calm, of power redefined through humanity. It was a reminder that the most dangerous thing to injustice was not rage, but clarity. And as long as stories like this were told, shared, and reflected upon, there was hope that the next time someone felt tempted to humiliate another for sport, they might hesitate, remembering the man who stood still under a milkshake and changed a room without throwing a single punch. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you think, support the mission by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Your engagement helps amplify these voices and these truths. Stay connected with Black Voice Story.